Welcome to Pop and Lock. I'm Landry Ayers. Winter has come and gone, and after a disappointing end to the original Game of Thrones series, we found ourselves back in Westeros once more for a historical look at George R.R. Martin's world. Joining me today to discuss House of the Dragon, our deputy managing editor at Reason, our old friend Natalie Dowzicky.
Can't get rid of me that fast.
As well as a first-time guest on the show, senior editor at Reason, Robby Soave.
Thanks for having me.
I don't know about either of you, but I really had no intention of watching House of the Dragon when it was announced and really when it was promoted. You know, there are banners and ads all over these major cities talking about it. And I was like, they completely lost me at the end of Game of Thrones. I loved the first 95% of that series, watched it every week, was part of the sort of collective experience of seeing it week to week and really enjoyed it, and completely lost me at the end, so I had no desire to watch it. But after some urging from Natalie in particular here, I decided to give it a chance, and I was pleasantly surprised. And I think a lot of people had a pretty good reaction to this series. So what was it about House of the Dragon and how this first season unfolded that you think allowed for that redemption of this series and this world that they live in? What was different about this that allowed it to sort of stake its own claim in Westeros?
They're trying harder. The people who making it are clearly actually trying in the way that they were trying. And I totally agree with what you just said through the first 95% of Game of Thrones. What's so sad and so frustrating about that is they just kind of stopped at the end. They stopped caring. They stopped writing, like, they used the same line of dialogue for Jon Snow over and over and over again in the last 4 episodes. He says literally the same thing. You can see the fact that you can see a coffee cup on screen with left out is emblematic of the lack of care, attention to detail that they were paying by the end. This, which I think, I get the sense might not have happened if George R.R. Martin had been as involved in the Game of Thrones show as he is in this show. So he is so involved in House of the Dragon. I think it's very funny to compare, House of the Dragon is advanced mode. Like, they were in Game of Thrones, they changed the name of one of the characters, Theon's sister, right? They changed her name from Osha in the series to Yara because they were concerned that Osha was too similar a name to another character, to the wildling woman who takes care of Bran. Can you imagine now in House of the Dragons, like 2 characters have the same, there's Aegon, Aemond, another Aegon, a Daemon, Rhaenyra, Rhaenys, Rhaela, like they're not even, they're just saying, keep up with us. That's George R. Martin's storytelling. And it's great. It works. It expects something of the audience, and it treats the audience like a mature audience that is gonna try to want to figure out some of these things. And it's just working. It's just really working. It got better and better as it went on, and I'm so happy to have that experience again that we were having. I would say through the first 6 seasons of Game of Thrones at least.
I also think I was saying this to Landry earlier. I think House of Dragon did a very, very good job. If you hadn't watched Game of Thrones, which, I mean, all of us have watched Game of Thrones and watched it as it came out. If you hadn't watched Game of Thrones, you still could enjoy House of the Dragon and know what was going on and did not need the Game of Thrones context. And I do think House of the Dragon did a better job, at least in this first season, of kind of laying the groundwork than Game of Thrones did, because Game of Thrones in the very beginning I felt like it was a little clustery in terms of trying to understand who was important, who wasn't important, and kind of the narratives that you needed to pay attention to. And I found far less people being confused about the first season of House of the Dragon than you did during the first season of Game of Thrones, where everyone was like, I'm not really sure who I should care about. And also they killed half the characters that I thought I was caring about. Which, I mean, there's much more death to come. But I think House of the Dragon did a much better job of not holding the hand of the audience, because there's the diehard Game of Thrones fans still enjoyed it and didn't think it was too too loose. But I think it did a good job of like also being open to an audience that isn't like so immersed into the Game of Thrones universe too. Because I had like 3 or 4 friends that did not watch Game of Thrones that loved House of the Dragon, and now they want to go back and watch Game of Thrones.
I was really interested in particular about the groundwork that they set, because there is a directorial choice that they make at the very, very beginning of this new series, which I don't remember happening frequently in Game of Thrones, if they did at all, which is the use of narration and voiceover, which kind of fixes the perspective and point of view for the story from the beginning. And I believe it's Rhaenyra who's talking about her father, Viserys, at all this time. And it kind of fixes the point of view and lets you know that you're seeing these events unfolding as she would have perceived them or even heard about them if she wasn't there. And I thought that was interesting because the original Game of Thrones novels obviously bounce between different perspectives and in first person, whereas you get this detached third person viewing point when you watch the entire series, which creates a bit of a disconnect between the two, whereas this one, it feels a little more cohesive and says that while we're going to get this sprawling story about this whole conflict and vying for succession and the throne and all of this, really Rhaenyra is where we start and is actually where we end the series. It's her perspective and her change that we start with and where we end. So I think this is a good opportunity to ask about her character because it's so central to the plot. Are we supposed to root for Rhaenyra? Should we in that way? Because she's a great character. She's very interesting and complex and has gone through a lot of things, especially when you juxtapose her with a character like Daenerys, which invites a lot of comparisons when looking at Game of Thrones. So what do we make of her character?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Rhaenyra from the source material. I should say I'm extremely familiar with the source material, and actually, the way the source material is structured is so different from the way the Game of Thrones source material is structured that actually speaks to some of the differences you were just getting at. Because Game of Thrones, the books are a narrative. Like each chapter is it's from Arya's perspective, or it's from Bran's perspective, or it's from Sansa's perspective. Whereas the House of the Dragons source material is like a history textbook. So it's from the perspective of a couple different historians who are like revisiting these events sometime later and recalling them. And those historians have their biases and they have disagreements about how the events happened. So, and the show has handled that very smartly. Like, for instance, the fire at Harrenhal, where Rhaenyra's lover, Harwin Strong, dies, and also the Hand of the King, Lionel Strong. So in the source material, historians don't know what caused that event. So some people speculate that, yes, Larys Strong, the vindictive, disabled, scheming younger brother did it. Or some people think it was just a natural occurrence. The Harrenhal's cursed. Some people think Viserys ordered it because he was annoyed by the shame brought to Rhaenyra. In the source material, Laenor, Rhaenyra's husband, who leaves, is actually believed to be killed from the way that the parents would believe it. So they added to a lot of they put some ambiguity. So in those cases, they actually took out ambiguity because they showed you what actually happened. But then they nod to like Rhaenyra and Daemon's first hookup, that night of awakening for Rhaenyra. In the source material is that like there are rumors that happened. There are rumors it didn't happen. There are rumors the Christian Cole thing happened. There are rumors that didn't happen. And even the way they shot it made it kind of ambiguous, if you know what I mean. So I've loved their choices on all those lines really well. But overall, yes, Rhaenyra is a main character in this. The way she was, I would say, one of like 4 main characters from the source material. You really do, you're set up to just kind of have to root for her, right? She's great. I love her from the source material. I think my one complaint is I like to, like, ironically or in a contrarian way support characters, and it probably in the source material it's a little bit more ambiguous that like there are good things about the Greens and bad things about the Greens. There are good things about the Blacks and there are bad things about the Blacks. in this, it's like, I don't know how anyone could be rooting for everyone's on Rhaenyra's side. Like, Daemon's problematic behavior aside, like, everyone wants the Rhaenyra faction to win.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I still love Damon because I think I think and I know they were trying really hard, especially in the like I want to say the first like 5 episodes to get us to like not like him. But I think his character is so interesting and complex. Like I think there's a lot going on there. I think he is one of the characters that there's just so much more like nuance to his role. And also like, gosh, what was the one episode that like I think he had one line in the whole episode or 1 or 2 lines in the whole episode, and he was by far the best actor in that episode. But I do my one problem with Damon is I wasn't like quite on the like crab feeder narrative. I was like, is this really necessary? Like, I know they needed to set up that like he went away and like fought for and that's why he like disappeared for so many years. But then he just like comes out of nowhere after like years of fighting and was like, yeah, now I'm gonna win the battle, just to like shove it to Viserys, basically.
Yeah, that was dumb.
That whole plot line was like a little tenuous, I think. Also just didn't seem like incredibly relevant. But I don't know a single person that's like, yeah, I'm on team Allison. Because I just like I just don't get it. Like Rhaenyra, well, they're setting us up to love Rhaenyra because then she's gonna do all this crazy stuff, and we're gonna have to be like, damn, we were already on her wagon, so now like.
And I can root for bad people. Like by the end of Game of Thrones, I love Cersei. I wanted her to win. I was like, no, she's a modern ruler. She has separated church and state. She's done with all this nonsense. It would be fitting if she just won. So I can support the bad people. I just don't feel that way at all about Allison's faction.
Right. There's nothing. Allison doesn't have the like same type of charisma that someone like a Daemon or a Cersei has. Like there's a certain level of status, or it's almost vindictive the way that she acts out of it, and it seems kind of childish and like it doesn't have control. She doesn't get that type of like really a firm grasp on what her power is until much later in the series, whereas someone like Cersei or Daemon comes out of the gate and is like, I know who I am and what I'm capable of, and that confidence and self-assurance is alluring, even if it's coming from really dangerous people, which I think is another lesson that this show can sort of talk about for, the charisma of leaders and how we allow ourselves to slide into more authoritarian ways of doing things just because we like personalities, even if the actions that they take are less than savory at the best.
I do think a weird part of Allison's character is that like it's almost as if she's trying to come off as naive in some ways. And I say that because like I would not give her like the status of being like conniving, like I would say like Cersei is. But like the scene, I think it was in the last episode where she's like sitting with the council and she's like acting surprised that they've been working like behind her back to try and get Aegon on the throne, and I'm like, wouldn't you have assumed this? Like, I was like, this seems silly that like she was like, well, I was trying to do it in a way that was like more accepted, and I was like, of course all these crazy dudes are like, no, we're gonna do it this way, and this like I just don't. I think she is a little bit more naive, like if you compare her to Cersei, certainly, and is like, I don't. She's like almost, I wish she was more like conniving, honestly. Like, I wish she was more evil.
I mean, she wants to put her beautiful baby boy on the Iron Throne. She always has wanted to. Like, that's her motivation.
Yeah, but he doesn't want it.
That's an understandable motivation. I mean,
yeah.
That's, from a historical or even real life perspective, right? People want their house to prosper, etc. And this is an opportunity, and is, animated, I guess, by the idea that, if you're looking for some legitimacy to what the Greens are doing, that yes, that Rhaenyra's children are not legitimate, are not actually Lenore Valarians or whatever. But
the line that always gets talked about is like, the people won't respect the leader if they're not truly the heir to the throne, or if Rhaenyra is named, even though Viserys has named her as his heir and will become queen, that the people won't respect her because she's a woman. And there's this, they bandy about this like fear of a populist uprising, where in reality most of the like problems and fighting and what's going to prevent people from ruling effectively, at least in this era of Westeros, it seems, is the people who are, behind the scenes making everything happen, the people on the council, the Hand, the other lords in keeps across Westeros, whereas the common people are kind of detached and don't really seem to care.
100%. They have to be herded into the dragon pit for the coronation. Actually, the way their expressions are shot in that whole thing is so indicative, which is they don't care. They can't tell these people apart. They can't tell one, blonde-haired person from another. Like they have this, a new king, that's nice. They probably don't know what the name of the current king is, which would track with what like the real, comparative, I don't know, the literacy rate of the 12th century or something, which is about what we're equivalent to, according to George R. R. Martin. They don't, the small folk, they don't care at all. If there's going to be a rejection of Rhaenyra for whatever reason, it's going to be, maybe the nobles were going to do it, but the people are they care about the price of bread. They're inflation voters here. I mean, they don't have a vote.
In that scene, there's like this funny, they like pan to the crowd a few times and a few people are like looking over like, oh, should we clap now? Like, oh, you're clapping, I'll clap too. Like that's literally what that scene was like.
I really did expect like Otto Hightower to pull a please clap at some point and it like
hold the sign up.
One of the things, I think Rhaenyra says it at one point, they're talking about like what's going to ruin House Targaryen early on in this series. And I think she says like the only thing that could tear it apart was itself. And when you take a big picture, I guess it is the entire House of the Dragon, even though it breaks into factions and all these different houses because of all the marrying off and, people taking different holds and things like that. But what really do you think, is there one cause, whether narratively or sort of in the structure of the world or within the Red Keep, that caused this descent into chaos and conflict that we're obviously going to see in season 2, that everything is built up to? Is it this like slow crumbling of institutions that people are scared about, with Viserys, being named king because of the Jaehaerys the First having to name the contested succession, and then him naming his daughter and not having a son, and everyone trying to figure out who's going to come next? Is it this lack of constitutional rule that they say like, well, the law is, and they say, well, whatever the king says is law, and then everything breaks at the point where Viserys dies and Alicent is just like, well, at the very end, he told me this. So it's about what the king says, but only one person hears it, but everybody goes with it anyway. So is it that? Is it people scheming behind the scenes? Is it that none of this matters and they have lost the support of the people? What do you think is really at play here? And what do you think that is trying to say about modern politics today? Because I think we can't talk about this without making some sort of link and why it's so resonant with audiences.
I think it's dynastic and territorial. Westeros has at this point even I would say probably even weaker legal institutions than the comparative time period, which is medieval England, which at least has the Magna Carta after King John, etc. This is really, it's the king's word is the law. I guess the religious kind, the church is a little bit of a check on the king, but it doesn't seem like it's any more of a check than the medieval church was. It's comparable to that. I mean, yeah, we see. I mean, I know from reading or listening to what George R. R. Martin's inspirations are. He was very inspired by the War of the Roses, the 100 Years' War, etc. in medieval England, even though his world is like the size of like South America, but it's the kind of English medieval history, which a lot of those constant wars mostly fought over personalities, mostly personality based conflict that one son fights another, or that you have multiple marriages. It's very familiar in that way, and that's kind of what is happening. I think in the modern context, it shows you how easy that is to happen if you don't have strong institutions, if you don't have legal norms, clear checks on the sovereign's authority, either vis-a-vis a constitutional system or just some kind of, or even in the kind of absolutism sense, where still there's the Leviathan, right? There's still some kind of consent from the governed being given to the monarch. Like we're before that. We're just but a major difference being these forces have access to the equivalent of nuclear weaponry, and they are the only force that has them. They're the U.S. before the Soviets get these missiles, so no one can stand against, no one can oppose House Targaryen except other elements within House Targaryen. It's very interesting. While they're doing the counting in that last episode, Damon's going, okay, we have this many dragons, they have this many dragons, and we would probably win, but because we have literally more dragons, but they have the biggest dragon, and everything will be set on fire and everyone will die if we do this.
I do think too, what's interesting, I was talking about this with someone recently, but if would this all have happened had Alicent not heard what she thought she heard when Viserys died? Absolutely. This still would have happened. They would have so it would still happen. That was just a convenient, I knew I was right, but anyway, he validated that for me. So I still think that would have happened. I think it's an interesting, within the House Targaryen, they're trying to figure out who's in the in group, right? So there's this struggle over who's more Targaryen in that sense, which the whole scene with counting they have 7 dragons and we have 13, and I mean one of their dragons is basically a puppy, so it's not all that helpful. But I think there's this. They all have this overwhelming sense of oh, we represent House Targaryen, and we're stronger than them, whoever them may be. But the weird thing about this is there was I think it was in the last 2 episodes, the Greens were obviously wearing the House Targaryen emblem because they're Targaryens, but it was in the it was visually in their green get up, and I was that looks so wrong because they're so used to seeing the red and the black, and I was they can't stomp on our ground. But there's also the weird power dynamic that goes on in there because I mentioned earlier, Aegon, Alicent's oldest son, Aegon, not the other Aegon that's coming, doesn't when they're in the carriage and they're trying to find him, he's basically says, I don't want to be king. And so there's also a weird power struggle going on there too, that he's why are you looking for me? I don't need to be king. I never wanted this. And Alicent's no, you're going to sit down, you're going to shut up, you're going to be king. Which is another weird power dynamic going on that he was well, this has been assigned to me. And it's very obvious to me that Aemond wants to be king. And I can't wait to see how
here's
that
the thing
unfolds.
about Aemond. Aemond wants to be king. We all know it. Aegon doesn't want to be king. He's not fit to be king. I'm sure that there's
I think he wants to be king now, but when they first were when Viserys first died, he was I don't want this. But exactly. I think now he's a power hungry Joffrey, right? He had crazy in his eyes just like Joffrey did when he was holding the sword above the crowd. It was screaming Joffrey. It's
true. It took that for him to realize what the power of the Iron Throne would really be. But I don't know why Aemond, who knew what this was from the very beginning, didn't just kill his brother when he had the chance. I was this is easy and no one would be that upset. You get rid of the 2 guys who were chasing him. You get Kristen Cole or whatever. I can't remember which one he was chasing. But
that's right.
I don't understand why they weren't just this guy would be much more. I mean, I don't know if he'd be a good king necessarily. He seems kind of cunning in that way, but he'd be more effective in that way. But I guess they have too much respect for lineage and succession in that way.
I honestly thought, because I have not read this book, so I honestly thought that when when Aemond was like went looking for his brother with Kristen Cole, I thought that Aemond's whole aim in that whole like 10-15 minute scene was to kill Aegon.
Yeah,
Aegon.
I agree.
I mean, but like he's a bad dude, but he's not that bad, I guess. Like he felt a little bad after he caused his nephew to be eaten by his dragon, right?
His
he
nephew
had that
slash
expression of
cousin.
It's just
Right.
Well, yes, they are all related in multiple ways, but their most direct would be nephew. But he, I mean, it would be. I think it would have been a little bit of a stretch if he just straight up murdered his brother for the throne. Like, also he loves his mom, right? Mom would have been upset about that. It would have been. I think it would have been a little out. Like again, bad dude, but not. That would have been on a next level just to straight up kill his older brother.
Yeah, we've got to get to like season 3 maybe before we just start jumping the shark like that.
Yeah.
Okay, but the other that reminds me of like when the other person that I definitely thought should have died right away was when Otto came to tell Rhaenyra that Aegon was now king. I wanted Rhaenyra just to, because the dragon's like perched up on the little bridge behind him. I was like, just blow him to bits. Come on.
I mean, if you kill the messengers, then you stop getting messages, right? I think she had enough self-awareness there. Like, there's a long tradition in. I read a Romance of the Kingdoms is a Chinese historical novel about the Warring States period in like 200 AD. And the novel, it's actually a little bit like this because it's real history, but the novel is like written later and is biased towards one of the factions and then adds all these magical elements. But like they're always sending messengers, and then you get the messenger like, oh, screw you, and then you behead the messenger. I'm thinking like, who would take this job as like, oh yeah, I'll deliver messages to the rival kingdom? Like the death rate of that is astronomical.
It's them being like, I think I could change him. Like
maybe it'll work for us.
I think
Well, I guess technically just Ceres. I get the two. Which one's the younger?
Lucerys is the R.I.P.
The one who died.
Sweet little boy.
That's true.
The one who died is Lucerys? Okay. So
Lucerys is the older heir.
Lucerys was technically a messenger. Yeah. And he died.
Yeah. Well, he was a messenger and not a warrior. And that's what makes it extra sad. Yeah.
Okay, but in terms of a visual aspect of the way that whole scene was shot, with the shadow of the dragon above his little baby dragon, that was beautiful. Like, absolutely beautifully done. And I think it gave us good like scope, and also like there was enough nuance to that scene because like you were saying earlier that Aemond, all these names sound the same. Aemond was like wasn't trying to kill his nephew, he was just trying to take his eye, and he was like, oh, my bad, like he's dead now.
And that was actually, that's another example of it being a little bit different from the source material in the way, because in the source material, it's just obviously no one was there to witness that. His body, the dragon's body and the kid's body, like wash up on the shore of Storm's End the next day. And they, everybody saw the dragon fly after him. So it's reported that Aemond straight up murdered Lucerys. Whereas in this interpretation, now we're seeing that, well, I think he's still very much at fault. Maybe it looks like he kind of lost control of Vhagar and didn't quite mean for it to happen. But that's not something you would know if you're just, reading the history. In the history of Westeros, it's written that Aemond chose violence, kicked off that war because he just did that. So that it's very interesting in that way.
It was answering to the foreshadowing from earlier, because I think it was Viserys in like the first or second episode, pretty early on, the first, second, or third episode, made this comment about how like we have the dragons, but we don't control them, and it was like a kind of a throwaway line at the time, but then like now I already went back and watched it, and it was like very clear that he was trying to say like, oh, sometimes we can't exactly control these huge beasts that like we're very fortunate and lucky to have, and no one else has them, and they just kind of go off the rails. Although technically Lucerys dragon started it, right? Because he's chasing him, and then Lucerys dragon does a little fireball, and they're like, oh no, you're done for.
we're already showing more of the many, many sins of the very end of the original series, Game of Thrones, is just having wildly different dragon rules from minute to minute. Like, dragon's invincible, no one can stop them. They shrug off arrows. They shrug off your stupid little stronger, I forget what the arbalest bolts or whatever they were.
Yeah,
in
the
1
bolt
minute.
things.
Then next minute, nope, easy to take them by surprise, easily killed by them. Then the next minute, no, we put them on every plank in the city is armed to the teeth with these. Nope, can't hit it. Invincible, can't be stopped. It was just so frustrating. I mean, just so annoying. So now we're back to no. It is, and Damon said it, I think, in this last episode. It's possible to kill a dragon. Very, 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 very difficult. But dragons, when they fight, they kill each other. And so those are the rules we're operating with. That makes sense. And cool.
We mentioned earlier about the complete lack of care of the small folk in the world of Westeros and in King's Landing specifically that we got a bit of a sneak peek at during the coronation. Is it just me? I don't know if it would work. So I'm curious to kind of bounce this around with people because I think it would be really interesting. I would love a Downton Abbey style, upstairs, downstairs, or like a lower decks, at least even if it's just an episode. Like we get a one-off episode that is, we follow one of the people that is in the midst of the Red Keep. It's one of the people that has to like bring the tea to Rhaenyra or
the
to
cup boy, right?
Yeah, or the cup boy, or the woman who's lighting the candles who sends the messages to the White Worm. Like, there's so many more people involved in the daily goings on that make the kind of banal events of a Regency drama really interesting and compelling, but we only get them from the really high perspective of the people who are specifically involved. And I want to see those events from the perspective of someone who is not a member of one of these like landed gentry or something like that. So I'm curious about if you think that would work or if it would lose the kind of Game of Thrones quality of it, because so much of the series is about the like people vying for power. I was just curious about that because I think it's a dynamic that is missing from the show that we only get very brief like sneak peeks of, and they only become important for small events. But I think it's much more than that.
I absolutely agree with that. I think it would be very useful, yes, and to see more perspectives that are not among the royalty. I mean, some of the best moments or sequences in Game of Thrones occasionally dealt with things like that. I'm thinking of Arya and the Hound's explorations through the Riverlands, where they really see firsthand the devastation this dynastic war has caused. They interact with people who are living through hell over it. And in the books in Game of Thrones, occasionally they'll introduce usually a one-off perspective. Oftentimes it starts the book or it ends the book of some other character, maybe some character of insignificance who interacts in a very interesting way. One of my favorites, and it was not duplicated in the show at all, is this character in Old Town who is studying to be a maester and like failing at it, and he's like getting drunk with his friends at the bar, and you see like edges of other characters there. Like, it seems that one of his bar drinking buddies is actually one of the Sand Snakes impersonating a male to study at the. And then the resolution of that story, he interacts with someone who's like who needs something from him, and it very much seems like that person is probably Jagan Hagar, the face change, but it's not confirmed. You don't know. It's just hinted at, and then that's never revisited until and then later, like chapters and chapters later, Sam sees that character, and there's some indication that character has been replaced by Jagan Hagar. And it's so cool. It's so cool because it's not good. You have to really read between the lines on it. It's just a theory people have. So I would love more of that. The goings on at the Red Keep, and we did get a little bit of that in the right. It was hinted at, I guess, in the Greens episode, where you have the cup boy reporting to the maid, reporting to etc. But yeah, absolutely, we're missing that perspective a little bit.
I guess all we really got was like the when we're looking for Aegon, like we're going through the streets a little bit more, and we like did that, like there was like the brief child fighting scene,
Yeah.
which was like also kind of odd.
That was
And
kind of
then
extra.
it was, yeah. It was very confusing because I kept telling Robby, I was like, oh, like I think they're gonna play into more the fact that like Aegon has a bunch of bastards, which like they were already hinting at because they were showing all the like blonde children that are now child fighters. But that was more to just like evoke that he's like crazy and doesn't give a crap about anything and whatever. But I guess I'm thinking about it like from a perspective. So like if we got the perspective of like a local person at the coronation, right? So they're being like they had the way they did it is they had like Rhaenys being
Right.
like shoveled in instead of us seeing it as like a town folk. So we're seeing like Rhaenys being shoveled in because she gets separated from oh my gosh, what is that guy's name? She gets separated from one of her
Sir
guards.
Eric.
Yeah.
Eric. Yeah. So she gets separated from Sir Eric, and then she's being like shuffled in, and like obviously she can tell like something is wrong. And then we see like that whole scene from her perspective, also because then she like comes to the floor with her dragon. But could you imagine if we like followed someone else in that shuffle, being like very like, you know, whether it's like a shop owner, brothel person, whatever, and like they're getting shoved down this place, they have no idea why. And then like it gets disrupted by a dragon coming through the floor and
Not
just like
disrupted, people killed. That would be like, you survived. That's like the day you went to the Boston Marathon or something, and the massacre happened, right? That would be your memory of it.
Yeah, and also like, and then you would assume that like if these are just like laymen not understanding like all the dynamics that are going on within the Targaryen family, you would assume then that person, whoever we're getting from that perspective, would see Rhaenys as like a terrorist, right? Because she like came like and killed all these people during a coronation of a king. So like that is like a completely different dynamic. I mean, I don't get me wrong, I really like Rhaenys, but I do recognize that she, you know, slaughtered a bunch of people by doing that. But she like, I think getting it from that perspective would have been interesting, even if it was like a 10-minute bit, right? When like Rhaenys was like supposed to be getting her dragon or whatever, and then we like cut back to it. But yeah, I do think that element is missing a little bit.
The common folk not liking the dragons necessarily is something to watch for and pay attention as the show develops. Then
I think it was also like maybe there wasn't really enough time in this first season to get more perspectives like that, partially because of the time jump, which I do think the time jump was executed pretty well, considering you changed like almost all the major cast members. We had like babies going to like mid-teenage years. So I think it was executed well. So it did get like a decent amount of criticism online for being like a little like chunky and like why didn't you just start there instead of doing the time jump? But I honestly appreciated the forward, like was that first 5 episodes, right? I think it was 5 or 6.
Yeah.
That were before the time jump, partially just because I loved oh my gosh, it's not Emma is it DRC
Millie
who's the first one?
Is the younger one. Yeah.
Yes. I love that actress, and she did a fantastic job.
She was really great.
I mean, so did DRC. So that transition was very good. But I do think they gave themselves a bit of a challenge doing a time jump like that. But I mean, I think they executed it well. I don't know. Some people were angry online about it.
I thought it was great. But
I thought it was great. There were some times where I was like, why did this person get recast, but this person didn't?
Sir Christian Cole has not aged.
I want to get on Sir Christian's skincare routine.
Yeah. I mean, whatever he's got, sign me up. I will do it.
I guess just being angry for 20 years is a skincare
Yeah, but then you would
routine.
have wrinkles.
Feeling spurned for years.
But I guess he just has to contain his anger it's the fact that he's a knight and has to just look so stoic all the time, probably. That's probably what it is.
The time jumps were necessary, right? If you're going to be this faithful to the source material as I think it was appropriate to be, and we've seen that being faithful to George R. R. Martin's vision is actually a good thing. You had to there are so many kids, and if you were going to keep all of those kids, every single one of them, not consolidate any of them, you could see how without George R. R. Martin, the Benioff, Weiss, the people who did Game of Thrones, they would have consolidated some of those children. if we're gonna have all of them, and we want to communicate to the audience who's, and that Rhaenyra and Daemon are both married to different people, are married to different people who are siblings and then married to each other. Like, to fully understand that and not be confused, you had to do it this way. Like, if you had just dropped us all into episode 8, which is after the last time jump, we'd be like, why do we care about these kids? Wait, why are they? It wouldn't have made any sense. So I think, given their commitment to telling the story as it actually is, it was necessary, and it was executed pretty well.
And then you also get to see the development of these people's motives, which is so much of what's interesting about the show, is them coming to, and I was really struck. Game of Thrones was always exciting and interesting, and I liked the sort of the twists, and you're always wondering what's going to happen. But there were only a few, like, handful of times where I was like, and this might be just me, there might be other people that feel differently, but I was like emotionally invested in characters where I was like, wow, I'm really feeling something right now, other than a handful of times. But there were multiple times, even for Viserys, from the beginning. By the time they're having that dinner in episode 8, and he is like demanding that everyone sit around and just like be cordial for this dinner, and it's so tense. It was a very emotional moment for him to see them start tense and then begin to relax and unwind. And you can tell there's like all of this tension that like he begins to sort of release. And it was really what was holding him together. And that at the end of that dinner is when he begins his like descent and begins to die effectively. And it was a very, very emotional moment where you had seen years of this man's life build up to this, and all of the hidden feelings and the dramatic irony of some people know things that others don't, and the hidden motivations all came to a head. And if you had just dropped in at that moment without any of that context, it would have been so sorely lacking, which to me makes it seem like you could pick almost any period in Westeros, and with sufficient time and exploration, you could probably make a compelling story. Princess Rhaenys, her entire like fight for the Iron Throne when she wanted to be on it rather than Viserys, we could follow her instead of Rhaenyra, and from the beginning of her story, and that would be just as interesting if given the time and had the story been written for that. So I think it really is just a testament to the careful hand of the writing, that if followed, like Robby was saying, if you really follow George R.R. Martin's vision, you're going to understand the spirit of what makes these stories compelling, rather than try and turn it into something that it isn't, which is what happened with the original series.
That scene was also fantastic because it was so relatable. Right? Because like,
Yes.
like we were talking about, like everyone online was talking about like, oh, this is like what Thanksgiving dinner is like, right? Like Thanksgiving dinner after the 2016 election, they just did it the Game of Thrones style. But like that was one of the best scenes because of it's like it was so relatable, and then like all of the children standing up and like giving their little quips about each other, like oh my gosh, the girl that's married to Aegon, who
Helena.
is obsessed with bugs. Yeah.
Oh, right.
Where
And
she
has
stands up and
prophecies.
talks. Yes, she does prophecies. She stands up and talks about how marriage is terrible, and like there are so many things like that. You're like, wow, this is just like, they like threw little like jokes in there, like just for us to make it relatable, and because everyone like, I feel like everyone's like been at a dinner that's like that, like not to that extreme, obviously, but been to like at like a like that has just like those elements. So I think that was one of the best scenes, especially in the last like few episodes that didn't involve dragons, of course, because all those scenes get amped in my mind. Wait, we didn't talk about the feet pics yet.
Oh, okay. If you want to talk about feet, Natalie, be my
He
guest.
killed a lot of people for just to look.
For
Just
feet.
to look.
Wait, Robby, I don't think I asked you this. Is that how it went down in the book too?
No, I guess so. Sir Larys's loyalty to Alicent and the Greens is mysterious in the source material. It's not clear why he is so much on Alicent's side, given that his entire house, which we only know in the television series he had murdered, was more closely associated with Rhaenyra, and in fact, Rhaenyra's children are his older brother's children. So no, he has
Like,
his own foot thing is from the source material, that he's club-footed and is resentful over it. That is part of the source material. But nope.
No problem. If that's your thing, that's fine with me. That's totally fine. But he killed so many people, like Robby said, just to look. That's
that whole scene. I think everyone like watching had like a collective like, are you kidding me right now? Like when that first scene where like Alicent's like head is looking at the camera and he's like just staring at her feet.
It really did take me by surprise. I was like, what is this guy?
I would have liked one more. I would have liked a scene between him and his father, whom he also killed in the fire, right? To better explain their dynamic, because I didn't quite, man, he's an evil character. I didn't quite buy the level of evil he was doing, given, because his dad seemed like a nice guy. His brother was great. Like,
his brother was like a cool guy. I was like, he's so nice.
Yes, it was a lot. I would have liked a little bit more there. That and the crab people were about the only things I thought that were slightly underbaked. Sorry, crabs don't eat people. They'll pick at dead bodies, but if you set a crab on someone who's still like squirming, the crab is going to run away. I'm sorry to like shatter everyone's thinking on how crab physics works, but crabs are not zombies. They don't like feast on the flesh of still living people.
Well, in the Stepstone,
I guess
they have zombie crabs in the Stepstones. Well, there are zombies.
Yeah, well, I guess
so who knows?
The crab feeder, Larys's like arc was a little rushed, also because like in part of like the fire stuff with Larys, and like he has like the people that were imprisoned that he like took out their tongues, like they're now like his little like
right,
like
yeah,
his
that's
little
so if they get caught, they
executioners.
can't say who did it, I guess.
Right.
Got it.
And then there was also like in that same like general spew of scenes was like when he set supposedly him or his people that carry out bad things for him set fire to that other place. That was
that the White Worms place?
That was not executed quite perfectly because we were a little confused about what it was. That was the White Worms residence. So I guess that was him getting rid of the rival spy network. But of course we did not see her die. So given that we didn't see that, I think everyone can reasonably expect that she survives that.
Yeah, that whole, like, I understand him setting fire to his house and, like, killing his brother and his dad. Like, that all made sense. And then we, like, jumped to the fire at the White Worm, and I was like, wait, is this, like, the same? Also because, like, in that shot, there's, like, a hooded guy walking normally away from the fire, which, like, is presumably the guy that did it. And I was like, wait, but that can't be Larys because he's not limping.
Right. It's
so it's tongueless
little
his tongueless
fire
people.
starters, I guess. I mean, buildings are very, very easy to set fire to in medieval times. So
yeah, well, but it's also like they looked like stone.
Yeah, they should look like stone. Should have been a wooden building, but
yeah. Also, they must have run out of budget with casting for the crab feeder or whatever, because they've got this like awesome makeup for him and this mask, and he's like a very imposing character. Not a line of dialogue.
Yeah,
you could tell.
I hope they work. I hope they put a little bit more thought into battles in the future.
Yes.
Like people, I guess people have treated Game of Thrones like it was really good on this front. I've actually like always had a lot of issues with some of the way their battles are laid out. Not all of their battle. The Blackwater battle from season 2 of Game of Thrones when Stannis attacks the city. Great.
Yes.
I was more underwhelmed by the Battle of the Bastards than some other people, I guess. But the crab feeder battle made no sense. I did not believe that they had 2 dragons. I did not believe that they couldn't just shoot fire into that cave forever until they were all dead. And the archers don't really they have 2 dragons.
Yeah. And then Daemon comes out and he's like, I'm going to wave a white flag, but then I'm not. And then I'm going to charge at this thing none of these archers have any aim. He's just diving for cover like it's a video game, and then like sneaking through. It was.
Yeah, I hope they, given that there are a whole lot of battles with and without dragons to come, I hope they put a little bit more thought into some of those. Or, I mean, I guess don't show them if they're going to be that ridiculous. But
okay, before we finish up, Robby can't answer this question because he knows what happens. How many episodes do you think does Aegon survive in the next season, Landry?
Oh, how many episodes do I think?
Yeah, how far does he make it through next season? Or who do you think the first person to die is going to be of the like main cast?
What's even the point in guessing? Because you're just sentencing everyone to die. I mean, at a certain point, other than a handful. I think. Well, is Corlys dead? No, Corlys. He's got to die. Yeah, no, he's got to die. No, he's too old. He's got to die.
Okay.
Well, I won't say anything. Who do you think, Natalie?
I think Aegon is going to last maybe 3 episodes of the next season. And the first person I think that's going to die next is
I do know the answer to this question, so I can't.
Yeah, that's why I said you cannot answer.
It's this person, then this person, then this.
Honestly, I think Otto.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah.
I will say just that without giving anything away, the amount of death. Again, given that we're going to be it's clear we're going to be very loyal to the source material. Unlike Game of Thrones, where some characters are alive when they're dead, or some characters are dead when they're alive. In the point that Game of Thrones is in, like, Stannis is still alive, Ser Barristan is still alive. It's just very different things. That's clearly not going to happen with House of the Dragon. We're telling a very faithful to the source material. With the room for creative, because we don't know exactly how necessarily all things happen, but. So I'm assuming that all the characters that die are pretty much going to die pretty much on pace with the source material. It's going to be interesting to have them there be happy times, to not just be a relentless, brutal slog, or just like, I would say the 5th season of Game of Thrones was almost too depressing at times. I think that was particularly pronounced in the 5th season when the whole burning of Stannis' daughter, I really liked Stannis a lot in the source material. It's not clear at all that will happen that has not happened yet in the books, and it doesn't. Stannis is written somewhat differently, and that doesn't seem like something he would do. It seems like maybe something Melisandre would do, like behind his back. But anyway, things got really, and then Arya brutally kills the one Kingsguard guy, and Jaime kind of rapes Cersei, and Sansa's with Ramsay, and it was just like an orgy of like the most like gruesomely dark parts of the show. It was starting to become like just unfun to watch. Like you needed like a pick me up after. So good luck to them not doing that again, given a lot of the choices there that are not going to be really choices, given what happens with the source material.
Well, we'll see if we can brighten it up in the probably 2.5 years it'll be until we get to see House of the Dragon season 2. So who knows? We'll have a new president by then. At this point, who knows at that point? Think about that.
We'll see if that coronation is contested.
Thanks for listening. As always, the best way to keep in touch with us and get more Pop and Lock content is to follow us on Twitter. You can find us at the handle @PopandLockPod. That's Pop, the letter N, Lock with an E, like the philosopher, Pod. Make sure to follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. We look forward to unraveling your favorite show or movie next time.